You regret that?
Hugely, hugely. God, I'm about to make myself cry.
Have you read 50 Shades of Grey?
No, I haven't. Have you?
Why, I have. Why haven't you?
Well, if I'm truthful, it's because I promised my editor I wouldn't.
Cancel culture. You might have heard of it, and you might have heard that beloved children's author J.K. Rowling was canceled from last year's Hogwarts reunion documentary, in which all the still living members of the film franchise got together to talk about and reminisce over their Harry Potter days. All their success can be owed to one woman, J.K. Rowling. But why was the author canceled? Before we dive in, make sure you like and subscribe so you can stay updated on all the latest celebrity goss. As our society is becoming more progressive, more people are opening up to the idea that instead of the traditionally assumed male and female sexes,
it is the latest fight over transgender rights.
Everyone is gender fluid, meaning that we can be influenced by social pressures to become male or female gender, regardless of whether we were born biologically male or female. JK has made unpopular and controversial comments about trans issues. I think that everyone has the right to their own opinion, and whether or not you agree with JK, let's use this as an opportunity to hear her side of the story. A furor started in the Twitterverse in June of 2020, with Rowling responding to an article about equality for people who menstruate. The author retweeted it with the remark, "People who menstruate? I'm sure there used to be a word for these people. Someone help me out. Wumben? Wimpund? Woomud?" Despite negative responses from some of her followers from the trans community, JK liked and followed content which is considered to be transphobic. After getting a lot of hate for this from the trans supportive community as well as trans activists, JK wrote an article on her personal website and blog explaining her beliefs. As a result of this, JK became target for cancellation. JK Rowling canceled for clashing with the trans community. Let's unpack this issue a little. Firstly, transgender people often do not agree with each other about what is transphobic. Trans woman Caitlyn Jenner was negatively criticized for not supporting the right for biological men to compete in women's sports, as she felt that it created an unfair advantage against biological women in sports. Secondly, there have been reports of biological men in Los Angeles who transferred into women's prisons when they said they identified as a woman. Rather than acting as respectful members of the community like most trans women would, these convicted male felons used a loophole in the law to get access to easy victims within the woman's prison. Thirdly, J.K. Rowling is a biological woman who experienced domestic abuse by the hands of a biological male. Fourthly, if terminology describing genders does not have a clear basis in biological sex, court trials for rape cannot be fairly assessed, and people suffering from illnesses with specific repercussions for the biological sexes cannot be sufficiently treated. Finally, J.K. Rowling is worried that sociopathic cis males will use new trans laws and vague terminology describing gender and sex to benefit not the trans community, but their own desire to get away with harming both cis and trans women. In regard to gender-neutral bathrooms and changing rooms now allowed in Scotland, J.K. Rowling says that we do not want to open the door to any man who wishes to come inside. After J.K. published her article, cast members of the Harry Potter franchise expressed their solidarity for the trans community. Upon receiving a BAFTA award this year, Emma Watson, who played Hermione Granger, famously said, "I'm here for all the witches." We can only assume that in this statement, Watson was referring to an argument she had on Twitter with Rowling regarding trans people. Emma Watson, along with Daniel Radcliffe and Rupert Grint, the three main stars of the Hogwarts movie franchise, have all denounced Rowling as a transphobe. Emma Watson: "Trans people are who they say they are. I want my trans followers to know that I and so many other people around the world see you, respect you, and love you for who you are." Daniel Radcliffe also made his opinion known in an article published by the Trevor Project. He said that while Rowling was responsible for his success in life, he does not stand by her comments. He apologizes on her behalf for those who can no longer cherish the HP series and hope that they can still find value in the Harry Potter stories despite Rowling's tweets. These and other comments by the Harry Potter stars came out after Rowling was canceled from the Harry Potter reunion documentary. It left all of us wondering why JK was not part of the show when she was the person who invented the Potterverse that we all know and love. One thing that I find interesting is that while JK herself is criticized for commenting on what freedom the trans community should or should not be able to have, none of the Harry Potter cast themselves are trans people either. We might want to ask ourselves whether or not there are a double standard happening here. Let's take a closer look into the conversation that has occurred on social media platforms between J.K. Rowling and the trans community. I learned from a fabulous trans woman, Blair White, that J.K. Rowling has been excluded from every Harry Potter organization out there, including the American Quidditch Association, which has changed its name so that it can disassociate itself from Rowling. She is a trans woman, and like most trans women, do not pose a threat to cis women, but like Caitlyn Jenner, she understands that there are people out there who will misuse the system. She also pointed out that there were trans activists on social media who put Rowling in danger by posting images of her home address online. She also called the stars of the Harry Potter franchise out on their lack of gratitude towards JK. Originally, JK was an important part of the production of the original movies and was good friends with the cast. Her books helped Ivana Lynch break out of an eating disorder and was pen pals with her. Other people have claimed that JK has not shown an understanding of the difference between sex and gender. It is commonly understood that sex is defined as being a biologically inherited trait encoded in X and Y chromosomes. A female typically has an XX chromosome, and a male typically has an XY chromosome. If a YY chromosome is created, it is immediately inviable, and thus children with YY chromosomes don't exist. But children can be born with an XXY chromosome or an XYY chromosome. The XXY chromosome children are males that have an additional X chromosome and may have decreased male characteristics such as small testicles and feminine characteristics such as wider hips. XYY chromosome boys have more masculine characteristics such as height and aggression. The fact is that if a child is born with at least one Y chromosome, it is considered a biological man and will usually exhibit male anatomy such as a penis and testicles. Gender, on the other hand, is a more socially conditioned notion. That is to say that an individual born with male genitalia and a Y chromosome can choose to live as a female, and that an individual born as a female with a vagina, vulva, uterus, and breasts can choose to live as a male. This year, Rowling, who has been labeled a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, seems to have embraced this label, because in her view, anyone who states these basic biological facts can be considered a radical these days. On March 13th of this year, Rowling made several posts regarding the trans community. She retweeted a lesbian who has been labeled a bigot for not wanting to date a woman who still had a penis. A woman should be able to state her sexual preferences in a potential partner without being pressured to accept features she does not want in a partner. Perhaps it is superficial of her to not want her partner to have a penis, but if penises are not her thing, she doesn't deserve to be insulted over it. Rowling also said, "Far right to little boy wearing a dress. Take that off. It means you're not a real man. Gender identity theorists wanting to wear dresses means you're really a girl. Radical feminists, boys can wear dresses, you look great. Which of these two positions are most alike, Andrew?" This was her response to Twitter user @Wheeler, who said, "You are empowering far-right forces that endanger all women and queer people with misleading and hateful rhetoric. It's not too late for you to walk back from the dark path you have found yourself on. Please listen to the people who are asking you to lead with love." On April 3rd, trans activists made a video about killing TERFs and putting J.K. Rowling in a hearse. J.K. viewed this as a death threat, but the video was not found to have breached Twitter's safety guidelines. On April 19th, a detransitioned trans man shared her story of how, as an autistic girl, she was told that if she did not transition, she would commit suicide. She received the gender reassignment surgery, including a mastectomy, at 16 and got breast reconstruction surgery at 19. These conversations paint the picture that not all trans people disagree with JK's viewpoints on sex and gender. Everyone deserves the right to their own opinion and has the responsibility not to put others in danger by publicly posting their address or forcing them to choose partners they are not attracted to. In conclusion, while it is easy to label someone as being transphobic, it's harder to form a more nuanced opinion that takes everyone's needs into consideration. We always need to remember that whatever we think about gender, everyone deserves respect. That also applies to people who seem transphobic. Rowling has donated to numerous charities, voluntarily reducing her billion-dollar net worth so that she could achieve social good. If sex ceases to become a fact, the money that she has poured into battling against the effects of multiple sclerosis, a disease that affects biological women and men differently, will have been in vain. Do you think that J.K. Rowling should have been canceled? Let us know in the comments and make sure you like and subscribe to our channel.